When my uncle sent me that video, I didn't expect my entire reality to shift. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted, ready to settle into my usual evening routine. My phone buzzed. Uncle Greg. That was unusual. We talked, sure, but he wasn't the type to send random messages, especially not with the words, "You need to see this, Jenna." I'm sorry. Curious and slightly uneasy, I clicked on the video, and in that moment, my world tilted on its axis. There she was, my sister Samantha, lounging in a chair, drink in hand, a smug grin stretched across her face. The setting was familiar, my parents' backyard, their weekend barbecue. Samantha looked relaxed, carefree, and completely oblivious to the camera recording her. I mean, come on, she was saying, rolling her eyes dramatically. Jenna's too clueless to ever kick me out. She just lets me stay there rent-free like a total sucker. Laughter. Not just hers. Others chimed in, our cousin Eric, her friend Melissa. Even Dad chuckled. She really thinks I'm struggling, Samantha continued, shaking her head in exaggerated pity. Like, poor little me, can't afford my own place? Please. I make way more than she even knows. But why would I waste my money when my idiot sister lets me live for free? My stomach twisted. I replayed it. Twice. 3 times. Each time, her words cut deeper. Too clueless to ever kick me out. A total sucker. Wasting my money. I felt frozen. The air thick around me, suffocating. For 3 years, Samantha had been living in my house. My house. When she first moved in, it had been out of necessity, or so I thought. She had just gone through a rough breakup, lost her apartment, and called me in tears. I just need a little time, Jenna, she had said. I swear I'll get back on my feet soon. And, like the fool she believed me to be, I had opened my doors. No rent. No bills. Just a place to stay while she figured things out. And now, here she was, laughing at my generosity. I should have been shaking with rage. But instead, I felt something different, a strange, eerie calm. Uncle Greg's message popped up again. I wasn't sure if I should send this, but you needed to know. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The old me, the one who always gave Samantha the benefit of the doubt, wanted to ask for context, to give her a chance to explain. But the new me, the one who had just been slapped in the face with the truth, that me just typed back. Thank you. Don't say anything to her. I'll handle it. And I would. I didn't confront her. I didn't call her out. I didn't storm into her room demanding an explanation. That would have been too easy for her. Instead, I smiled at her over breakfast the next morning, the same way I always did. Asked her about work. Feigned interest in her stories. Laughed at her jokes. And when next month's rent came due, the rent she had never once been asked to pay, everything would change. She had no idea what was coming. The morning after watching the video, I stood in the kitchen, calmly stirring my coffee as Samantha strolled in, completely unaware that I knew the truth. Morning, she said, stretching her arms dramatically. Damn, I slept like a baby last night. That guest bed of yours is way too comfortable. I smiled. Glad to hear it. She had no idea. No clue that I had spent the entire night making plans. Samantha moved around the kitchen like she owned the place, grabbing the last of my oat milk, pouring herself coffee, and humming to herself. 3 years of this. 3 years of me making space for her. Letting her take, without hesitation, without appreciation. She slid into a chair and sighed, rubbing her temples. Ugh, work is a nightmare right now. I swear, if my boss emails me one more time about those reports, I might actually lose my mind. I nodded, pretending to listen while my mind replayed the words from the video. I make way more than she even knows. She had a solid job. A steady income. She could move out whenever she wanted. And yet, she'd been lying to my face. Pretending to be struggling. Exploiting my kindness for all it was worth. Which meant there was no justification, no reason at all, for her to still be living here. I took a slow sip of my coffee. So, what are your plans this month? I asked casually. Samantha frowned. What do you mean? Oh, you know. I shrugged. You've been here for a while now. I figured you might be thinking about your next steps, looking for a new place, maybe. She let out a dramatic groan. Ugh, Jenna, I have so much going on right now. Moving is the last thing I need to deal with. Plus, it's so expensive. Expensive. I fought the urge to laugh. She could easily afford it. That much was obvious. But I kept my expression neutral. I get that, I said. But, I was thinking, maybe it's time for some changes around here. Samantha barely looked up from her phone. What kind of changes? I let the silence stretch just long enough for tension to build. Then, with the same casual tone, I said, well, starting next month, I think it makes sense for you to start paying rent. Samantha froze. Just for a second. Then she let out a breathy laugh. Wait, are you serious? I tilted my head. Yeah. I mean, you've been here 3 years, Samantha, rent-free. I figured it was time. She scoffed. Come on, Jenna. We're family. You really expect me to pay rent? I held my coffee cup just beneath my lips, watching her. Yes. The word landed like a slap. Samantha leaned back in her chair, her face twisting into something between amusement and disbelief. Wow. Okay. I mean, I just wasn't expecting you to pull something like this. Something like this. I had let her stay here out of generosity. Out of love. And she had mocked me behind my back. Called me a fool. And now she was acting like I was the one being unreasonable. I forced a light chuckle. It's not really a big deal, Samantha. Just basic rent. Nothing crazy. I thought maybe $1,200 a month would be fair. Samantha's jaw dropped. $1,200. That's insane. I raised an eyebrow. Not really. It's actually below market rate for this area. You're getting a steal, honestly. She shook her head, setting down her coffee with a sharp clink. Are you seriously doing this to me? After everything? Everything. I nearly asked her what exactly she thought she had done for me. But instead, I just smiled and stood up, taking my coffee cup to the sink. I figured I'd give you a heads up now, I said, rinsing my mug, so you have plenty of time to get your finances in order. Samantha stared at me, mouth slightly open, like she was about to argue. But she didn't. She just sat there, blinking as if she couldn't quite process what was happening. And that's when I knew. She thought I'd cave. She thought I'd feel guilty, backtrack, tell her I was just joking. She had no idea that the real storm was still coming. Samantha avoided me for the next few days. Normally, she was all over the house, sprawled across my couch, blasting Netflix late into the night, leaving dishes in the sink like she expected me to clean up after her. But after our conversation about rent, she suddenly became scarce. She barely spoke to me. When we did cross paths, she kept her responses clipped, short. And yet, I could feel the irritation radiating off of her, simmering just beneath the surface. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to being told no. I had been too accommodating for too long. And now, with just one small shift in the dynamic, she was already showing signs of cracking. Good. I wanted her to feel it. The discomfort. The tension. The realization that she was no longer in control. She thought I was naive. She thought she had me wrapped around her little finger. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. It was Friday night when Samantha finally decided to confront me. I was in the living room, curled up with a book, when she stormed in. No warning. No pretense of small talk. Just raw, unfiltered frustration. So, she said, crossing her arms. Are you really serious about this rent thing? I looked up, completely unfazed. Yeah. Why wouldn't I be? She scoffed, pacing back and forth. I just don't get why you're doing this now. After 3 years? It makes no sense. I set my book down and met her gaze. Because it's time, Samantha. You have a job. You make good money. There's no reason you shouldn't be contributing. Her lips curled in frustration. We're family, Jenna. Family helps each other. You're really going to start treating me like some random tenant. I didn't flinch. You're living here like a tenant. Why shouldn't you pay like one? Samantha's nostrils flared. I could see the gears in her head turning, scrambling to find a way to twist the situation in her favor. Then, Like clockwork, she switched tactics. She sighed dramatically, softening her voice. Look, I know I joke around a lot. Maybe I don't always show it, but I appreciate you, okay? I've been going through a lot. The guilt trip. Classic Samantha. I tilted my head. A lot. She nodded, sighing as if the weight of the world was on her shoulders. Work stress. Personal stuff. You know, life. I don't talk about it much because I don't want to burden you. I let that sit for a moment. Then said, so, you have the money then? Samantha blinked. What? You said it's life stress, not financial. So paying rent shouldn't be an issue, right? Her face twitched just slightly before she quickly masked it. I mean, technically, yeah, I could pay it, she admitted, waving a hand dismissively. But why should I? You don't even need the money, Jenna. It's not like you're struggling. And there it was. She didn't think she owed me anything. She thought my kindness was an obligation. A slow, amused smile spread across my lips. It's not about whether I need it, Samantha. It's about fairness. She rolled her eyes. Oh my God. Fairness? Are you serious right now? Yes. Samantha let out a bitter laugh. Wow. You've really changed, huh? I kept my voice light. Maybe. Or maybe I've just woken up. I saw it, just for a second, the flicker of panic in her expression. She still thought she had control. But something felt different now. And she didn't like it. She inhaled sharply, shaking her head. Well, I'm not paying rent. So I guess you're going to have to figure out what to do about that. I held her gaze. Let the silence stretch. Let her think she had the upper hand. Then I smiled. Okay, that was all I said. Just okay. And I watched as uncertainty crept into her face. She had expected me to argue, to plead, to negotiate. But I didn't need to. Because next month was coming. And she had no idea what was waiting for her. The first of the month arrived quietly. Samantha, on the other hand, did not. She stomped into the kitchen that morning, acting like she didn't have a single worry in the world. She poured herself coffee, grabbed one of my expensive protein bars, one of many little luxuries she never bothered replacing, and flopped onto the couch, scrolling on her phone like she always did. She was relaxed. Smug, even. Because she thought I had backed down. She thought my little rent talk had just been a bluff. A moment of frustration I'd eventually let go of. She thought she'd won. But she hadn't. And she was about to find out. At exactly 9 a.m., Samantha's phone buzzed. I watched from across the room as she frowned at the screen. She tapped a few times, then suddenly sat up straighter. What the hell? She muttered. She turned her phone toward me, eyebrows raised. Jenna, I just got an email from your rental management company. What the hell is this? I set my coffee down calmly. Oh, right. That's your lease agreement. Her mouth fell open. My what? Lease agreement, I repeated, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Since you said you weren't paying rent, I decided to formalize everything. That email is your rental contract with the property management company I hired. Samantha blinked. She looked at the email again, scrolling frantically. This says my first rent payment is due today. That's right. I nodded. I figured I'd make it official. Her head snapped up. You're actually serious? As a heart attack. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Oh my God. You're insane. I raised an eyebrow. No, Samantha. I'm just done being taken advantage of. I could see it happening now, the cracks in her confidence. The way her mind was racing, trying to find an escape. A way to talk herself out of it. I waited, and right on cue, she flipped tactics. She softened her voice, switching into victim mode. Jenna, come on, she said, pressing a hand to her chest like I had personally wounded her. You're my sister. I thought we were supposed to support each other. We are, I said. And for 3 years, I supported you completely, without asking for a single thing in return. She swallowed. But I wasn't expecting this. You never gave me a warning. I let out a small laugh. I gave you a full month's notice. That's more than fair. Samantha's face twisted. I don't have the money for this right now. I tilted my head. That's interesting, I mused. Because last week, I heard you on the phone bragging about buying VIP tickets to that music festival next month. Her mouth snapped shut. Gotcha. I leaned forward slightly. So, you have the money. You just don't want to pay me. Samantha's face turned red. That's not. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Look, Samantha, you have two options. You can sign the lease and start paying rent like a normal adult, or you can move out. Simple. Her jaw tightened. She was seething. But she knew I meant it. She crossed her arms. And if I don't do either? I smiled. Then, as per the lease terms, you'll receive a 14-day notice to vacate. And if you still don't leave, well, then I'll have to file for an eviction. Samantha's eyes went wide. Eviction? She hissed, like the word itself was an insult. You would actually do that to me? I would, I said simply. Because you did this to yourself. She jumped up from the couch, pacing in frustration. I could feel her panic. The way her entire world had just shifted in a way she wasn't prepared for. I cannot believe you're actually doing this, she muttered, shaking her head. I picked up my coffee again. Believe it. She stormed toward the door, grabbing her bag. I'm going out, she snapped. Take your time, I said cheerfully. But just a heads up, if you don't pay by the end of the day, that 14-day notice will be delivered first thing tomorrow morning. Samantha didn't respond. She just slammed the door behind her. And I smiled. Because for the first time in 3 years, I was finally in control. Samantha didn't come home that night. Or the next. I wasn't surprised. This was exactly her style: run away from problems, avoid responsibility, and hope they magically disappear. But I wasn't her problem. I was her landlord. And when she finally did come back 3 days later, I was ready. It was late, almost midnight, when I heard the front door creak open. I sat on the couch, pretending to be engrossed in my laptop. But the second Samantha stepped in, I caught the shift in her posture. She wasn't just irritated anymore. She was furious. She kicked off her heels aggressively, practically throwing them against the wall. Her hair was messy, like she'd been too distracted to care. Her eyes darted toward me, and I could see the storm brewing behind them. I stayed silent, waiting for her to speak first. She dropped her purse onto the counter and exhaled sharply. We need to talk. I closed my laptop slowly and leaned back. I'm listening. Samantha folded her arms. You really filed the paperwork? My lips twitched. So she checked. Good. Yes, I said simply. She let out a dry laugh. Jesus, Jenna. You're seriously evicting me? I raised an eyebrow. No, Samantha. I gave you options. You just didn't like them. She stepped closer, her frustration bubbling over. I was gone for 3 days. You didn't even try to talk to me before doing this. I tilted my head. Funny. I seem to remember you walking out mid-conversation. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You don't get it. I was figuring things out. Figuring things out? I repeated, feigning curiosity. Like, how to keep living here for free. Samantha's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to argue, but then she stopped. Because we both knew the truth. Instead, she switched tactics again. Her expression softened, and for the first time, I saw something resembling genuine fear in her eyes. Look, she said, her voice quieter now. I messed up, okay? I shouldn't have said what I said. I was just venting. I didn't mean any of it. I didn't flinch. Yes, you did. Samantha hesitated. No, You called me an idiot, Samantha, I cut in. You laughed about how I was too dumb to ever kick you out. You bragged about playing me for a fool. She swallowed hard, looking away. I heard it, I continued. I watched you say it. And so did Uncle Greg. At that, her head snapped up, eyes wide. You told him. I laughed. He told me. Samantha's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The realization hit her like a slap. She'd been caught. Exposed. And worst of all, she couldn't lie her way out of it. She exhaled sharply, pacing again. Okay, I get it. I screwed up. I stayed silent, watching her unravel. I don't have anywhere to go, Jenna. She stopped, staring at me, waiting for me to break. But I didn't. Because this time, I wasn't going to save her. I picked up my laptop and pulled up an email. Actually, I said, scrolling, that's not true. Samantha frowned. What? I took the liberty of looking into some affordable apartments nearby, I said, clicking on one of the listings. There are 3 places within 10 miles that fit your budget. I even spoke to a landlord. He's willing to waive the security deposit if you apply this week. Samantha's jaw tightened. I can't believe you did that. I shrugged. Why wouldn't I? You have a job. You make good money, remember? She scoffed, shaking her head. You're actually enjoying this, aren't you? I met her gaze, my voice calm. No, Samantha. But I am done being used. She took a sharp breath. But she didn't argue. Because she couldn't. She knew I was right. I gave her every chance. I treated her with kindness. With patience. I offered her options. But in the end, she had made her choice. And now, she had to live with it. Samantha let out a bitter chuckle. Wow, so this is really happening. I nodded. It is. She glanced toward the hallway. Toward her bedroom. The place she had treated like her own for years. But it wasn't hers. It never had been. She turned back to me, jaw clenched. Fine, she muttered. I'll be out by the end of the week. I gave her a small, knowing smile. Good. And just like that, the power shifted. For the first time in years. I wasn't the fool. I wasn't the pushover. I wasn't the idiot. I was free. Samantha moved out 3 days later. She didn't say much as she packed, no snarky remarks, no passive-aggressive comments. She barely looked at me. And honestly, that was fine. She had spent years treating me like a fool, taking my kindness for granted. Now, for the first time, she was forced to stand on her own 2 feet. And it was long overdue. The night before she left, I found her sitting in the living room, staring at nothing. A half-empty suitcase sat beside her. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over and sat across from her. She didn't look up. For the first time in forever, Samantha wasn't playing a role. She wasn't acting superior or smug or manipulative. She just looked small. And maybe, just maybe, a little lost. I took a deep breath. Samantha. She finally glanced at me. What? I studied her face. The exhaustion in her eyes. The tension in her shoulders. I don't hate you, I said quietly. Samantha snorted, shaking her head. Could have fooled me. I sighed. I wish things had been different. She frowned, looking down at her hands. Yeah, she muttered. Me too. I let the silence stretch, then said, You know I didn't do this to hurt you. Samantha's jaw tightened. It still feels like you did. I nodded slowly. Maybe. But think about it, Samantha. If I hadn't stopped this now, when would you have left? She didn't answer. Because she knew. She had been perfectly happy living off of me, knowing I'd never push back. And if I hadn't seen that video, she would have kept going. Forever. Samantha exhaled, rubbing her temples. I don't know, okay? She trailed off, shaking her head. I leaned forward. You're smart, Samantha. You're capable. You've had the means to take care of yourself for a long time. So why didn't you? She swallowed. Because it was easy, she admitted. You always made it easy. I sat back, nodding. And that's exactly why I had to stop. She stared at me for a long moment. Then finally, she sighed. So this is it, huh? I gave a small smile. Looks like it. Samantha shook her head, then let out a quiet laugh. Guess I can't call you an idiot anymore. I smirked. No, you can't. For the first time in years, Samantha and I sat together without any manipulation. Without any lies. Just 2 sisters, finally telling the truth. And for the first time, I think she actually understood. The next morning, she was gone. No dramatic exit. No screaming match. Just a packed suitcase, a closed bedroom door, and a simple text message an hour later. I'm out. Good luck, Jenna. I stared at the message for a long moment before locking my phone. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even relieved. I just felt done. And that was enough. A week later, I walked through my house, the silence wrapping around me like a long overdue hug. No more doors slamming. No more missing groceries. No more walking into my own home, feeling like a guest. It was just mine again. And I had earned that. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Uncle Greg standing there with a knowing smile. "Well?" he asked. "How's it feel?" I smiled. "Peaceful." He chuckled. "I bet." I stepped aside, letting him in. He glanced around the house, nodding in approval. "Looks better already." I laughed. "I think so too." Greg turned to me, his expression softening. "I know that wasn't easy, kid. But you did the right thing." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "Then why does it still feel weird?" Greg folded his arms. "Because she's your sister." I nodded. "She's your sister," he repeated, "but that doesn't mean she was good for you. And it damn sure doesn't mean you had to keep letting her use you." I looked down, processing his words. Then, I met his gaze. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Greg let out a slow breath. "She'll have to be." And I knew he was right. Samantha had been forced to grow up. She had been forced to take responsibility, maybe for the first time in her life. Whether she liked it or not, she couldn't rely on me anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was the best thing that could have happened to her. That night, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine, staring out the window at the quiet street beyond. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something I hadn't realized I was missing. Freedom. I had spent years letting someone else take up space in my life. In my home. In my peace. I had given and given and given. And received nothing but manipulation in return. And now? Now, I was free. I smiled, taking a sip of my wine. Samantha had laughed about playing me for a fool. She had underestimated me. And now, she was learning the hard way. Because I had stopped playing the fool.